And today we're going to be talking about strategy for rebuilding teams in season. So you might say, hey, why are we talking about this in August, Mike? What's up with that? But guess what? The season's going to be here before you know it, and you could be in a rebuild before you know it too. It could take 1 or 2 injuries to really knock your teams out of contention. So, one of those things that you have to know is when is your team going to rebuild? How do you know that you're going to be doing it? I think that's one of the hardest things to do. How do I know it's time, and how do I know how to go about it? So here's some of the strategies that we employ when we're doing it. Nate, let's actually start off with you.
Yeah, so I think a strategy that I employ both in a season where I know I'm rebuilding before the season even starts, and also in a season where you don't know for sure until the 4th or 5th week. I had the same strategy every time. About that time, the 5th, 6th week, rebuild quick and try to be the first one to do it. Because when you're rebuilding, you're looking for first round picks, and you're essentially, because you want to make a quick rebuild. You don't want to drag this out any longer than you have to. You want the next year's first round picks, especially this year. You want to get a bunch of these 2023 first round picks. This class looks great. So to do those, you got to get them from your league mates, and you got to be the first to get them because each league mate only has one, and there's already people out there that don't have them for next year. And some people have 2 or 3. You got to be the first one to get them, because if other offers start going around, you're going to have a harder time getting them. If you're first to the punch, you're going to get a better value on those first round picks. You don't have to compete with other people. So once you get to the point where, hey, I'm at a rebuild, you need to act. You need to go all in. If you, kind of just put your toes in, you might not really get what you want. You might just be stuck in the middle.
Follow-up question to that. When you're being the first rebuild and trying to acquire the first round picks, are you looking at standings, at total points? Or you're targeting the win now teams? So is that an assessment that you're making looking at the rest of the league? Or are you just looking at individual rosters and seeing how you could better your team for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the age of my team, in correlation with my record. And usually points scored more so, but you still have to win to get into the playoffs. I mean, you can score a ton of points, but you have to win games to get in the playoffs. So if, I'm in 10th place, I have like 1 win while, the top teams have 4 or 5 already. It's going to be a hard uphill climb for me, no matter how many potential points I have on my team. So, I'm looking at the potential points. I'm looking at my team. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into rebuilding and realizing when you're rebuilding. I'm sure the rest of you guys will touch on this a little bit, but once you made the decision, you really got to go all in. You gotta make it happen and get those first round picks when they're not at a premium.
And it's one of those things. You could also do like a partial rebuild. You could try to win now and later, maybe try to limp into the playoffs, but depending on how bad your team is, if you're doing it early, it's okay to tank, I guess you could say, as long as your league fees are all paid up and you're not doing anything collusive or anything like that.
If you're tanking, you're still playing players that are playing. You're not playing players that are injured. That's not the way you play fantasy football. And if your commission allows that, that might be a league you try to get out of. I still think you should play players that have a chance to at least score points, not a guy that's on the bench that's not even going to play at all. So
Chev, let's kick it to you. And I love this one, by the way. This is a strategy that I employ a lot. And people have made fun of me for some of the players I've gotten here, but they've actually ended up being contributors, and they've ended up being guys that I've sold for a profit. Chev, what do you got for us?
The point I want to make is staying active on the waiver wire. There's so many times where I see teams that probably should be rebuilding or are rebuilding, and they just toss in the towel, and they're nowhere to be found after week 8, week 9, when there's players still to be had on the waiver wire. And if you want your team to get better, you have to try to find players on that waiver wire that are going to gain value. That way they can be in your lineup at some point, or that way you can sell them at some point. A good example would be from me is when I picked up Ramondre Stevenson before he kind of started to get his touches in the Patriots offense. And I mean, I didn't really need him. Wasn't going to make it anywhere in my starting lineup, most likely. Just you never know with those running backs. And I was able to trade him after he had 2 really big games. And I think I traded him and Rondo Moore for like a first and like Brandon Cooks or something like that. Guy wanted young players. He had Damian Harris. And I was like, sure, man, you can have him. Here you go. And I think it ended up being a higher pick in the first round. So just for picking up Ramondre Stevenson, not sure if he's going to do anything, had a spot for him. and it turned out well for me. And I think if you're able to pick up these players and you're staying active, it's only going to help you. It's only going to help your team. They may not work out. It may not be good. They may fall flat on their face. That's okay. You picked them up off the waivers for free. Drop them and try again. I mean, there's so many guys that gained value throughout the season. I mean, Darius Slayton is a guy that nobody really knew about. And Darius Slayton comes out of nowhere. You probably pick him off the waiver wire, does good. If you sold him, awesome. If you didn't, it's all right. You got to get rid of him again, probably, if you had him. For free.
There's a great example of that. A couple of years ago, we saw, if you were rebuilding, you could have picked up Travis Fulgham off waiver wires and flipped him for a second round pick, maybe even a first at some point.
Yeah,
I did that.
You did do that, Mike.
I did that.
I remember that.
And there's another guy, dude. J.D. McKissick was a big waiver wire guy, and he actually helped me win a couple games. Chev, I think it's important to say that this is a twofold strategy here. I think your strategy should be applied to contending teams as well.
Yeah, it's true.
And before the season, there's a lot of times where I find myself saying, I don't need that guy. Two guys that I said I don't need, James Robinson, and Robert Tonyan. Two guys that definitely could have helped out my teams. It's always good to have depth and flexibility.
When it comes down to it, I know Nate said you'll know when the time is right to rebuild your team. Sometimes when you try to sell those players, it doesn't happen right away. So the way I'm saying it is to pretty much just make sure to continue to stay competitive throughout the season, because at some point, some of those players will have value. And then when it comes down to playoff time, right before the trade deadline, people are going to be hitting up your line knowing your team stinks, but you have maybe 3 or 4 good players that you can get a possible first, a possible second for 2023 draft class, or if you want to get some that has a 24 draft class, that probably has some value as well, because I know there's some good players coming out on that season too. So, you just have to make sure to do that so you can move forward and just don't give up, because some people, they want to sell and they don't want to buy right away. But when the going gets tough, all right, I'll slide you that first, I'll slide you that second for later on. So just don't get discouraged about how your season is going at the end, because your team isn't that good to begin with, but those people will come along at the end of the season to hit up your line for your rebuilding so you can move forward to the next season.
Stay competitive is a good one too, Pork. I know you said last year you were actually trying to rebuild and your team got hot. And I think you actually ended up sneaking into the playoffs. So you never know what could happen. All you need to do is get into the playoffs. That's true. Sometimes it can go the other way. Pork makes a good point, though. Be patient, too. Don't try to force anything here. I know you want to get better. You want to do this or that. You want to improve for the future, but you can't force anybody to make trades. And if people see desperation, they're going to lowball you. It's that easy. Be open to all trades. Don't just shoot anything down. You have to look at it objectively first. There's going to be times where it looks like you might lose a trade right now, but if it really benefits you in the future, make that trade. You're going to have the peanut gallery in the comment section of Sleeper. When you are making these trades, always get draft capital in return. Always get something. I hear a lot of people say 4th round picks, 5th round picks, they don't have any value. That's false. How many times have you seen guys or gals bundle picks up in a 4th round, move up into the 3rd, or couple 4s and maybe a 3rd from next year? I'll get it back between now and then. You always want to have extra draft capital. If you have 10 spots on your roster, I want to go to a draft with 15 draft picks. I'm more than happy with that. If I feel like there's an overvalue in the draft, then I'll try to get a first for next year. You remember when we were doing a lot of mocks earlier in the offseason, 110, James Cook or Isaiah Spiller. Well, neither. It's Jahan Dotson and George Pickens. Now, obviously, those guys are going to go higher. But if you don't like any players there, but you have another pick or 2 left, move it back to 23. Trade back, get some future capital.
Well, that is it for this video. I do hope you all enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the video itself. If you want to support this team and go deeper with us and get access to bonus content, written content, rankings, and our Discord community group chat, be sure to check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. It's a great way to support the brand and let us know that you want us to keep cranking out awesome content. And you get access to all of us 24/7. Lastly, if you enjoyed this video today, I'm sure you'll love this one too. Be sure to go check it out. But hey, that is it for me today. I'll see y'all in the next one. But until then, y'all have a good one.